Welcome to Finding Home Healing. I'm your host, Sadie. I believe you were born with a light that guides you to your higher self and most passionate life. But for many of us, it's been extinguished or lost. My mission is to help you find your way back home to that light so that you can love deeper, live in your power, and truly thrive. For those lost or lonely souls, welcome home. All right, we are talking about NLP today, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It's a concept and a school of thought and actually a healing modality that not a lot of people know about. I ended up finding it through a very ironic source. It was just tons of people that were in my circle and in my network at the time of my life that were like, you got to do NLP, you got to do NLP. And I didn't know enough about it at the time to realize like how important it was. So I kept putting it off learning about it. And once I finally did, I was so excited about it. There are a lot of concepts under the overarching umbrella of NLP. But the reason why I want to talk about it is because it is so profoundly helpful in understanding how our brain works, how to communicate with ourselves and with others, how to change our belief system, how to let go of negative emotions, how to understand our own psychology, why we do what we do, our own motivation, our understanding our behavior as humans. It's really like this integrated world of psychology that some people who go down the traditional path of either getting masters or PhDs in psychology or psychiatry, MFT, marriage and family therapy, getting a master's in social work, whatever, they may or may not be exposed to NLP. So it's a little bit more of a esoteric, if you will, branch of psychology, but it's what I love and what I'm drawn to. So I want to go over some of the main concepts of NLP today. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and it is a communication model. It is a way for us to be able to learn about ourselves, how we communicate with the world, how we filter things. It's how we learn, how we behave, and how we change, and how most of it has to do with our unconscious mind and our conscious mind, and in some schools of thought, our higher self. So I would like to go over some of the main concepts and topics about NLP today because I work with clients and these are concepts that I teach them over the course of my time working with them, not only because it is so helpful for them in communicating with people that they're in relationship with, it's also helpful for them understanding how their brain works and how they create reality based off of their perception and how to change certain perceptions, which is really helpful when you're experiencing a lot of negative emotion and having a lot of limiting beliefs. NLP is really the way to change how you think about the world and how you view the world, how you legitimately see and feel and hear and interpret the world. So it's a really, really powerful school of thought and knowledge to have. I'd really like for you guys to have it. So like I said, it stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. When you break that down, neuro, obviously referring to the brain, linguistic, referring to language, and programming, referring to behavior and how you exist, how you are programmed. If you think about yourself like a computer, you are programmed to do certain things. Your programming happens in your childhood, literally from even when you're in the womb with your mother to age 7 to 18 to on and on and on. It just goes on forever. Your programming continues to get updated, but your base foundational programming really comes from childhood and from those first couple of years. So, like I said, NLP is a way to help shift, change, morph that programming in a way that is really, really helpful and supportive for you on your path to help your goals become achieved, to be successful, to really accomplish anything and everything that you need and want to in life. Some of the main concepts that I want to talk about today are the unconscious mind. I've already been referring to that. Internal representations, negative emotions and limiting beliefs. I already kind of touched on that as well, but we'll go a little bit deeper into it today. MER and timeline therapy. And then the 4 requisites for change and some of the principles of NLP. There'll be 4 of them. So 4 principles of NLP. I want to go through each of those topics today as we discuss this amazing healing modality. It's really what it is. So Just to give you a brief history, NLP was started in the 70s and 80s. So it's a newer branch of psychology. Some people listening, they might not think that it's real, or they might not have been exposed to it. People that have a traditional education, like a master's of family therapy or PhD in psychology, psychiatry, so on and so forth, they may or may not have heard of NLP, and that's totally okay. If any of you disagree with it or you don't like it, that's also totally okay. I'm not here to convince you that it's amazing. I'm just here to share the information with you. So not trying to offend or hurt anybody. I'm just saying that like this has been really powerful for me, and it may or may not be really powerful for you to learn about it and understand it. I also want to caveat that I have been trained in NLP for many years. I started my journey about 5 years ago, really getting into the deep teachings of NLP. And there's a lot that goes along with it because my particular teachers of NLP have other branches into like mental emotional healing, which NLP has its hand in, and also into energy work and spiritual healing, a practice called Huna, which is from ancient Hawaiian lineage. And I can talk about that a little bit as well if any of you feel called to that. But I do really want to focus on NLP. Another thing that actually I want to include in here before we dive into some of these other topics is that NLP is so powerful that you will have probably experienced it if you've ever been to a Tony Robbins event or training, or if you've done, honestly, really a lot of different types of personal development training, things like Landmark or ALA, Ascension Leadership Academy. There's another one that's in California, but I can't remember the actual name of it at the moment. It's similar to Landmark. But all of those doctrines, those personal development programs, they use a lot of the basis of what NLP is, because it's such a powerful way to help us change our minds, our beliefs, our deep-seated unconscious beliefs, our negative emotions, our energy, all of that. So these are not just things that, a small group of people use. These are really big concepts and big tools that, like I said, people like Tony Robbins are using day in and day out. My teacher actually, he has worked with Tony Robbins. They, when he was a kid, his dad, my teacher's dad, was integral with Tony Robbins, and they had a whole thing because they're very similar in their teachings. So they were very much in the same industry. And my teacher branched out to go a different direction, wanting to do smaller groups, that type of thing. So it's a widely known thing. If you haven't heard of it though, I'm excited that you're hearing it today. All right, so let's jump into unconscious mind. The unconscious mind has a lot of different roles that it plays for you. It does a lot of tasks. It's very valuable and very helpful for us. It is the part of you that you don't really know is there. So an analogy, think about your brain like a computer, or your whole being like a computer. And your unconscious mind is like the programming in the computer. It's the hardware and the software, if you will, inside, that's built into the computer that probably you are not knowing how it works. You're not interacting with it on a day-to-day, like inside of it. You're getting the benefits of it. You're having impact by it just because you're working with the computer's interface and the keyboard and the mouse pad and those types of things. But the unconscious mind is analogous to that software and hardware that's built into the computer that allows your computer to run. If your computer gets too bogged down with spam files, or it's overloaded with storage, or there's an infinite amount of ways that your computer can like break down, your unconscious mind works in somewhat a similar way. If you are having a harder time in life with being really unaware of certain things, or just not feeling super awake, and when I say awake, I mean like privy to what's going on around you, or to energy, or to things happening around you, it might be due to the fact that your unconscious mind is like bogged down and the processing power of it is maybe slower, similar to a computer. I want to go through some of the purposes that your unconscious mind has. So one, it stores memory. It's temporal, which means relationship to time, and it's atemporal, which is not in relationship to time. So your unconscious mind doesn't really have an idea of time when it's storing atemporal memories, but it does if it's storing temporal memories. It also makes associations and learns very quickly. Another thing it does is it organizes all of your memories. So think of if you've ever heard of like your timeline, where your past extends in a certain direction from you and your future in the opposite direction. Or when you just think about, what it was like when you were 7, for instance, it's like, where is that memory at? It's stored in your unconscious mind. It also presents repressed memories for resolution. So think of an emotional feeling like a repressed memory. Sometimes that feeling will come up or you'll get triggered because your unconscious mind is trying to tell you, hey, we have this repressed thing. We need it to come out and be released, like as if it were a trapped air bubble underneath the water. The unconscious mind may also keep repressed emotions for protection, depending on how closely acquainted you are to your feelings and how you respond to things in the world. You may or may not use negative emotions to protect you, and your unconscious mind will repress emotions for that protection. Your unconscious mind also actually runs the body. So when you think about it, like how you breathe and the fact that your blood is flowing all the time, and that you have a certain rhythm to your hormones and your neurotransmitters, how your body is interacting with the environment and how it's responding or not responding is very much due to the unconscious mind. It's, like I said, it's analogous to that computer system that's running without you really doing a whole lot in order to make it run, besides turning on the power button, which would be analogous to you opening your eyes in the morning. It also has a job to preserve your body. It's intended to maintain the integrity of your body. If you didn't have a functioning unconscious mind, you would not really be able to have a body at all. It's like the 2 and 2 kind of go together. In a lot of ways, some teachers explain that your body is the manifestation of your unconscious mind. So like when I work with people, if I find illness or diseases, or someone comes to me with a diagnosis and it's something in their physical body, that's automatically a signal to me that there's something in their unconscious mind that we need to go pinpoint, and we need to do either some release work, some healing work, some investigatory work to figure out what's the belief that is living inside of that part of your unconscious mind. What is the negative emotion that your unconscious mind is harboring or repressing? What's it doing that for? What is the purpose of that? Like, there's a lot that we need to investigate and figure out, because your body is the sign that something is in your unconscious mind. It's the domain of the emotions. It's a highly moral being in the sense that that one's a little bit harder to explain, but it's like your unconscious mind is always looking for the very best thing that it can do or that it can receive. Think of it like a little child. My teacher, a lot of this information comes from, so credit to him and his team. Your unconscious mind, he explained it to us, that it's like a little child. So it doesn't process negatives. That's here on my list as well. But it's a child in the sense that it's not ever intending to do you harm. So if you have a negative emotion or something like that, a limiting belief, something that's not helping you, it's not trying to hurt you. It's not trying to do evil or to do harm or hurt to anybody. It has a high morality. It's always trying to do the very best that it can. Your unconscious mind enjoys serving, and it needs clear orders to follow. It controls and maintains all your perceptions. We'll get into perceptions in a little bit. It generates, stores, distributes, and transmits energy. So again, if you think about your body as a manifestation of your unconscious mind, your body has an energy field around it, and all of the transmission of information that's not tangible, that you can't see technically or necessarily hear or feel, it's being transmitted and emitted through energy from the unconscious mind. It maintains instincts and generates habits. It needs repetition until a habit is installed. That's an important one. Unconscious mind needs repetition. It needs repetition and repeating things to be installed. So the more, like a mantra, the more that you repeat the mantra, the more it gets stored in your unconscious mind. Think about when you try to memorize a number, like maybe your spouse, your best friend, your family member, they have a phone number, and the more that you repeat it to yourself over and over and over again, the more it gets stored. That same thing happens for habits or behaviors. And the more that you do a habit, or the more that you take a certain action, like the more you go to the gym, or the more that you wake up at 8 a.m. every day, the more that that habit is installed at an unconscious level. It's also programmed to continually seek more and more. There's always more to discover. It functions best as a whole integrated unit. It does not need parts to function. It's symbolic. This is also a really important one. When I work with clients, I have them close their eyes and I lead them through different guided meditations where I'm having them pull up images or symbols, or I'm seeing images or symbols for them, which are often representative of the communication that the unconscious mind is trying to have. So for instance, I was just working with a client last week and I was doing a higher self meditation with her to try to help her decide what to choose, because she was at a crossroads, and I had her visualize her higher self somewhat in front of her along her future timeline. And I had her imagine that there were two paths going to that higher self location. And when she visualized one path first, it had all these different components to it. There was a cliff where she fell off, which represented like feeling really lonely and sad. And then there was this high where she was like floating on a bridge and it was really light and airy, and that got her to her higher self. And then on the other path, she had mentioned that it felt like bumps, like it was more bumpy. It wasn't so much of a drop and then a high. It was lots of little tiny bumps all the way like to her higher self. And all of those symbols and all of those images, they were representing energy to her that her unconscious mind was communicating. Meaning that her first path, she would maybe, by making that choice, she would have this experience of like a low, feeling really lonely, but then she would really come up out of it and have a much higher and better experience of life. And then on the other path, it would kind of be just rocky the whole way until she got there. So very, very helpful, very supportive, the fact that your unconscious mind is symbolic. Another one that's funny is that your unconscious mind takes everything personally. So again, referring back to how your unconscious mind is like a little kid, it takes everything personally. It does not have the ability to separate out itself from something else. So when someone says something to you, it's very literal and it takes it personally. An example is like, if you are telling your unconscious mind that you are wanting to start a habit of doing the dishes, I would suggest that you say to yourself, or you put it on your reminder list, like, please do the dishes, versus do not do the dishes. Or no, that's processing negatives. That's the next one. I'll go with that one. So processing negatives, your unconscious mind, it does take everything personally, but it also does not process negatives. So that's the example with washing dishes. If you are wanting to start something, I would suggest not including the not. I would suggest eliminating the not and just saying the thing that it is that you want to do. So instead of saying, don't forget to do the dishes, do not forget to do the dishes, you can rephrase that and say, please remember to do the dishes. It's a very subtle difference, but it's very profound in how it's communicating to your unconscious mind. It's also important to do that with other people. Like if you're raising kids or if you're working in a job, if you are constantly saying like, do not do this, do not, everything that person's hearing at an unconscious level is the thing that you don't want them to do, right? When I say purple elephant, you can't do anything else besides think about purple elephant. If I say do not think about purple elephant, that's the very first thing that you think of, because the unconscious mind does not process negatives. It cannot interpret the not. So if you don't want them to think about a purple elephant, don't say purple elephant, right? If you want to remember to do something, please say remember instead of do not forget. Okay, and then we can go back to takes everything personally. The world suggests programming to your unconscious mind. So your environment has a big impact on how your unconscious mind is programmed because of the fact that it takes everything personally. And the last one is that it works on the principle of least effort. So it really likes to travel the path of least resistance. Okay, we went over the unconscious mind. Hopefully that feels clearer to you. Some people refer to it as subconscious, but I like to refer to it as unconscious, and so do my teachers. It's just a much easier way to describe it. And in an NLP training, this is not a replacement for that by any stretch of the imagination. So I would really highly suggest that you do go to an NLP training. This is literally just scratching the surface for our purposes today to help introduce you to NLP. In a training, you would learn a whole lot more about the unconscious mind. If you do it specifically with the teacher that I've had, it's amazing. They are so great. They're great teachers. I can't say enough amazing things about them. And they really help you understand these concepts and things with a lot of analogies, a lot of pictures, a lot of storytelling, much more in depth and more than I can do here today. Let's move into internal representations. So internal representations are a way for you to store memories and sensory input. And what I mean by sensory input is things that you see, things that you hear, things that you feel, things you taste, things that you smell, and things that you just know. So there's all of these different senses, right? We have sight, sound, touch, taste, smell, and then what we call in NLP auditory digital, which can be translated more easily to just like a knowingness, like that sixth sense, if you will. Your internal representations are how you translate the sensory input into your brain and store it as memory. Okay, so I'll give you an example. If I am going on a hike and I take a moment to take an internal representation of that hike, what I'm going to do is I'm going to become really aware of what I'm looking at, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling, and that's going to help me make a memory in my head. Then, weeks later when I'm done off the hike, then I can go back to that memory by thinking about what did I see, what did I feel, what did I hear, what was I telling myself, and that gets stored in that memory. Think of it like, if you know, like the archaic way of old school organization with a file cabinet and physical folders, your brain kind of works like that. Or if you think about it on a computer, right? And on a Mac, there's Finder, and it's a way to store files. Your internal representations are like millions and millions of files that are stored either in your conscious mind or in your unconscious mind. With internal representations, there's a concept that I am going to go into to help you understand that called perception is interpretation. I'm going to get to that in a second, but I just want to make sure that we're really clear here on internal representations, that they're essentially like a picture or an encapsulation. Again, whether it's auditory, it's a sound, like you remembered a song, and you can associate different IRs, internal representations, to one another, which is why some people have like a lot of nostalgia to certain songs or to certain smells or to certain visuals. Like it will stimulate them to have a certain experience, because like for me, in my example with the hike, in my internal representation, I would have that sensory input that also included a lot of relaxation and fun and adventure and exploring. And those are energies and feelings that really light me up. So when I go and access that internal representation, then I almost have like a re-experiencing of all those sensations that were stored together with it. So again, it's an encapsulation of sensory input via different senses. And it's important as a concept to understand, because like, for instance, I was working with a client last week, and he, bless his heart, has such a hard time in this relationship with this person, and his internal representation of her is a certain way. I'm not going to go into details, but it's a certain way that makes him feel very frustrated and very annoyed when she's around. And it's interesting because his internal representation of her has been stored with both positive and quote unquote negative or less positive sensory input, because there are certain things that she does that really bug him and bother him. So his IR, anytime that he thinks about her, it brings up those feelings. That's a little bit more of like a more negative side. The hiking example is a more positive side. You can use your internal representations to your advantage and to your benefit. This is something that people like, again, Tony Robbins teach a lot, that if you can pull up your internal representation, then you are in massive control of your behavior, your actions, your outcomes, what you're doing every day. It's like what Olympians do before they are about to perform, right? They run through their internal representation of what it's like to win or to succeed or to have their PR, their personal record beat or whatever. they hold that internal representation in their head and they play it over and over and over again. So it's a valuable way to know how sensory input is being used in your brain, your conscious and unconscious mind. Okay, I'm going to come back to this idea because I'm going to get into perception as interpretation, but I want to first just kind of sweep over negative emotions and limiting beliefs. NLP is, like I mentioned, it's a model of communication to really help us understand our brains, how it works, how to discover and utilize our conscious and unconscious energy or programs that are running. And the aspects of human beings are such that we have multiple layers, right? We have an energy or a spiritual layer. We have a mental layer. We have an emotional layer. We have a physical layer. There's more than that, but we're just going to simplify it down to that for now. And negative emotions live in that emotional layer. There's also positive and happy emotions, but negative emotions are really what separate us from ourselves, from our happiness, from our joy, from our peace of mind. They are things like anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt. Those are the main ones. Then there's other things like shame, embarrassment, and the like. Those ones that I mentioned, those first 5, anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, those are like umbrella negative emotions. So a majority of all the other negative emotions fall underneath that as a category. For instance, under anger, there would be frustration, annoyance, those types of things. Under fear, there might be terror and anxiety and more of those types of things. Under sadness would be like depression, apathy, disconnection, those types of things. Hurt, you get the picture, right? So those are umbrella overarching negative emotions. It's important for us to identify those things because if we can identify our emotional body and have a relationship with our emotional body, we have more authority over it. We have more control. We have more insight into when we're not feeling super well or why we're not feeling super well. It's just important and valuable data for us to have and to know. Okay, limiting beliefs are one step above that in the mental world, right? In this world, these are things that are counter to who you are in the way that you see yourself in a positive light. Okay, so an example of a limiting belief is like, I'm not capable, or I can't do that, or I'm stupid, or I'm not good enough. Or even something more subtle like I can't do what they do. Or I'm trying to think of other examples. I was just working with a client this morning and these are some of the limiting beliefs that came up. Like I'm not capable, I'm not intelligent, I compare myself to others and I'm always lesser than. Those types of things. It's important for us to identify our limiting beliefs because they are really the ways that inhibit us from doing what we want to do, having what we want to have, and being who we want to be. They're like roadblocks in the way of our path that don't let us go out into the world. So negative emotions and limiting beliefs work together to really hinder you and stop you and prevent you, again, from doing what you want to do, having what you want to have, being who you want to be. Things like fear. Okay, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid that I'm going to be laughed at. Okay, well, what's the belief behind that? I am not smart, or I can't speak articulately. Those types of things. Those programs that are running in your unconscious mind, think of them like bugs. They're like spam, or when you download something on the internet and it blows up your computer. That's like what those are. They are programs that we need to go into your computer and delete them, clean them up, reorganize your files so that your computer can run more smoothly. To that point, in my training of NLP, I was also trained in a healing modality called MER, Mental Emotional Release. MER is a improvement, I would say, upon timeline therapy. They are very similar. Timeline therapy is similar to Gestalt therapy, if you've heard of that before. It's the idea that there's a concept of your past and your future that your unconscious mind has stored memories in, and you can imagine it as like a line or a string, and each significant emotional event along your timeline is impactful to who you are in this exact moment here today. What you think, what you believe, what your emotions are like. And the idea of MER is that we help you go back to those significant emotional events, whether you're conscious of them or not, whether they're stored in your unconscious mind or not, and do healing with those events, help you have a different perception, help you see the situation in a different way so that you can let go of those limiting beliefs, negative emotions, and essentially remove that roadblock from your life and from yourself. When I do MER with somebody, I'm having them close their eyes, I'm putting them into a relaxed state, a very mild hypnotic state, and having them float up above their timeline, either into the past, into the future. And I've worked with clients before where we went back to events that they didn't even remember consciously. They trusted their unconscious mind, their inner knowing. They floated back to certain events that were when they were 2, 3, 7, 8, 12, 15, that they didn't even remember experiencing, but that were so significant to whatever problem it was that we were working on releasing. And it was profound. They had a realization that, oh my God, this moment in time along my path or along my timeline impacted me so much. And so we go back to those events, we do healing work with them. And essentially what happens is, if you were to imagine your timeline and your significant emotional events like balloons, it's like we poke that balloon and then the negative emotion just disappears. It's kind of magical, but also really cool that it's gone. It goes away. Again, it's analogous to that idea of like there's trapped air underwater, and it's like we're letting that trapped air go, and that air gets to float up to the surface and be released. So it's a really powerful way to help us move through negative emotions and limiting beliefs. There are so many other different healing modalities that I also love, that I also value, that I also use in practice. This is just one that is correlated with NLP, which is why I'm bringing it up today. There's so much more that I could talk about all of those things, but I would like to shift into the 4 concepts of NLP and how to use them for you in your life. They are: perception is interpretation, the mind-body connection, cause and effect, and responsibility for change. Let's start with perception is interpretation. First off, we need to chew the concept of perception. In NLP, we're taught that perception is how our brain filters information. If you think about everything in the world that is floating around you, all the smells, all the sounds, all the sights, everything that is information around you, your brain has to filter all that information and sort out what's important and what's not important, because you can't take in all of the information around you. You would need to be a supercomputer in order to do that. Your brain doesn't have the capacity for that. So what happens is your brain actually filters all of the sensory input that you get from your environment, and it filters it through these different modalities. What it's doing is it's deleting information, it's distorting information, and it's generalizing information. Those things create your perception. I'll give you an example. When you are sitting at a table and you have somebody, a third party, that drew a 6, to one person sitting across from that table, it looks like a 6, but to you, it looks like a 9. That's the definition of perception, right? You are distorting the information because what you're seeing is actually a 9 and the other person is seeing a 6. In a lot of ways, some people, they'll delete the fact that the person is seeing a 6 and won't realize that that person is seeing a 6. They'll think that they're seeing a 9 because you're seeing a 9 or that person's seeing a 9, and vice versa. So with everything that comes into your world, think of it like this. There are 2 million bits of information that pass us in every single second of our existence. That's a lot of information. Guess how much your unconscious mind and your conscious mind can take? 126 bits of the 2 million every second. That's a big deal. You are taking such a tiny fraction of all the information, and all of the rest of the sensory input and the information is being deleted, distorted, and generalized. So you're filtering all of that into your internal representation, like we talked about earlier, right? You're taking all that sensory info. Your brain is filtering through these 3 methods, you're only picking up and netting 126 bits of the 2 million that's available to you every second. And that's then filtering down into your state, which is like your emotions and your mindset. And that's then filtering down into your physiology. And that's what creates your behaviors and your patterns. Okay, so everything's really starting at sensory input. Then you're getting filtered. Then you're creating an internal representation of that sensory input. Then that's filtering down into an emotional state. Then that's leading to physiology, behavior, and patterns. So that's how information works and how the flow works. Now, perception as interpretation is the idea that your perception is what you interpret it to be. That reality, in a sense, is only experienced by that who is perceiving it. A lot of people have that argument, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? I don't know. What would you say to that? Technically speaking, in accordance with NLP, if a tree falls and no one's there to hear it, then by definition, it's not making a sound, because a sound is something that somebody is receiving. And there's a lot of arguments to that. I don't mean to say that I have the answer to that, but I would say that in NLP words, that it wouldn't technically be a sound because there's no receiver. What that means is everything that's experienced around you is only in existence because you're perceiving it, right? If you're not there to perceive it, then it's not technically there. That gets a little bit complicated and confusing for a philosophy discussion later on in another podcast, which I love doing, but it's not appropriate here. So I'm going to make sure that I don't go down that rabbit hole, even though I really, really want to. The deletion, the distortion, and the generalization really comes from labeling and meaning making. Okay, so when you have the 2 million bits of information, you are sorting out the 126 bits based off of deletion, distortion, generalization. I'd go through all of those individually, but we don't have time here. So just think about deletion as what it is. You're deleting information. Like if, there's 4 houses down the street, you're not always picking up on the fact that there's 4 houses down the street. Sometimes you're deleting that information. If someone asks you, how many houses are down the street from you? If you didn't specifically count and have that memorized, then you wouldn't probably be able to know how many houses were down the street from you. That's deleting information. Distorting information is like when you maybe remember something wrong or you're seeing something that's different than maybe what's actually there. Like if you are, think of it this way, when you're looking at the horizon and you're seeing the sun dip below the horizon, it looks as though it's falling into the water, right? But it's not. It's not falling into the water. It's actually millions upon millions of light years away from the water. But your perception is distorting the fact that the sun looks like it's dumping into the water. And then generalization, that's very self-explanatory, but generalization is very much just that you are taking information and generalizing it across multiple applications. So as an example, if I were to think that my neighbor across the street is super friendly and really nice, in my perception, I might generalize that all the neighbors that are on her side of the street are really nice, or all the neighbors in this neighborhood are really nice because I had an interaction with her and she was super friendly. Then I might generalize that, oh, well, this neighborhood is just a generally good neighborhood. This happens a lot in politics. They'll see a Republican or a Democrat and they'll just generalize all the information about that candidate because they fit into that party. That must mean that they have all these certain beliefs and they stand for all these similar things. That's a generalization. That's happening in very big and small ways every single second of your existence in your reality. When you are interpreting your own perception, there's a lot of complicated stuff that gets involved there. If you're in a relationship with somebody and you're perceiving them behaving a certain way or acting a certain way, and they have no idea that they're even acting that way, your perceptions are different and you're interpreting what you're perceiving differently. It has a tendency to lead to a lot of conflict, to a lot of disagreements, to a lot of miscommunications. So when I work with a client, I'm always making sure that we're getting their buy into the fact that their perception is only theirs. They're only seeing the 6 on the table. They're not seeing the 9. And they have to learn how to be able to understand that someone else could be looking at the exact same thing and seeing something totally different because they're picking up a different 126 bits than the other person is. That's a very important concept. Also, to my point earlier where I said the sensory input is coming in and it's being labeled and there's meaning making, that's a really big concept and topic that I want to actually have a whole podcast dedicated to. So I'm going to cliffhanger you on that one. But how we label things and how we make meaning out of things is a really big deal in how we experience our own reality. Okay, the next one is cause and effect. This one's a little tricky to explain just because a lot of people don't like it, to be honest. It's harder to swallow. It has to do with personal responsibility and being at cause for things that happen in life. Now, being at cause, what that means is that you recognize that you have power with your perception, with your choices, with your free will to make your life and make what you do with your life up to you. So a lot of people believe that there's no choice in the matter, or that they're unempowered, or that they are just at effect from all of the circumstances around them. And they live as though their environment and their circumstances control them or rule them. They haven't stepped into being what we call at cause, meaning that they're not taking responsibility for the fact that their life is the way that it is, and that it's most of what's in their life, both good, bad, and neutral, are really their doing most of the time, right? This gets a little bit tricky when people ask me like, well, I didn't ask for my kid to have cancer and to die suddenly in 3 months' time. What do you say about that? You're correct. That was not you being at cause necessarily. That was definitely something that impacted you, that maybe you were a little bit more at effect. You didn't have control or power over the fact that your child developed an illness and then quickly passed. What you're at cause about is what you do with that experience, how you respond to that experience. Yes, there is a very real impact that is very felt and very noticeable. And what are you deciding to do with that experience? Are you going to sit in sadness and depression for the rest of your life and completely neglect all your other relationships, neglect your other children, your spouse, stop working at your job, like get totally disconnected from your passion and basically live the rest of your life out fully depressed? Is that what you like to do? If you want to blame your child's illness on you not choosing a different path, then that's your doing. But this concept in NLP is really to help get people out of recognizing or out of the unconscious, like I'm at effect and everything in the world is out to get me and I have no control, I have no power. And it's really to help them step into, no, you actually do have control and power over how you live your life, what you choose to do with the power that you do have, how you choose to respond to certain situations, and that ultimately shapes your life and your reality. I'll give you an example, a very specific personal example. And again, this is probably going to be a whole nother podcast, but I was very ill last year and I've been very ill a lot of my life. And when I say very ill, like I was at the brink of death very suddenly. It was an insanely unsuspecting illness that just happened and my body deteriorated very quickly. In the moment, it was difficult for me to be at cause. I'll be totally honest and transparent with you. I was so victimized and was like, the environment's done this to me, the mold has done this to me, the Lyme has done this to me, like all the things that was wrong with me, I wanted to blame those things. My stress, the relationship, whatever it was, I wanted to blame those things. But at the end of the day, that thing happened and I had a choice to respond. I was either going to let those things keep me in a victim mindset that, I'm at effect, I have been impacted by all these things, I'm a sick person now, that's my identity. Or because I've been trained, I can step into being at cause and say, you know what? Okay, this thing has happened. That's really crappy. There are a lot of things that have led up to this point that I can take responsibility for. I was overly stressed. I was not listening to my intuition. I put myself into dangerous situations and environments that I didn't fully have the wherewithal to check if there were toxins, environmental toxins, and biotoxins that, were potentially hazardous and dangerous to me. And now I am dealing with this illness. And I also have a choice that I can take this as a opportunity to learn and be more empowered and work really hard to get myself back to a state of health and healing. Or I can just sit here and feel sorry for myself and just live my life thinking that I'm a sick person. And obviously, I'm sure that you can guess which one I chose. I chose that I am not a sick person. I am actually a healed, healthy, and whole person. And by me being at cause in that situation, I was able to overcome this illness that most people spend their entire lives fighting and dealing with the repercussions of. It's extremely painful. The illness that I had was horrible. It is so life-sucking. It just makes you not want to even live or breathe. It's so much pain and suffering to the point where you just have this tiny ounce of life left in you, and that's what you have to sustain on every single day. It's horrible. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. But when you shift into being at cause, then that changes the trajectory of everything. I'll leave it there. Cause is greater than effect. Being at cause is being responsible for the fact that you have more control and more power over your circumstances, that your circumstances do not have power and control over you. The third one is the mind-body connection. This is pretty self-explanatory. The mind and body are connected, period. You can, argue with that all that you want, but that's a fact, okay? Your mind is a part of your processing, your unconscious mind, your conscious mind. All of that has to do with how your body functions and works. Your brain, literally your brain, is what's connected to your breathing system and your flow of blood in your body and your nervous system. Something that's important that I did want to bring up is that in the part of your mind-body connection, right? Fight or flight is a primary response, and that's not necessarily something that you have full control over. That's just a program of our survival brain, our reptilian brain, if you want to call it that. Something like anger and fear is a secondary response. That is something that you can train out of you. But when you have anger, when you have fear, you'll notice physiologically that your body changes. When you have anxiety, you can't sleep, your palms are sweaty, your heart's racing, your blood pumps faster, your heart or your breath rate goes up. So our mind is impacting our body, and our body is impacting our mind. There's tons of studies, tons of books. I'm not going to enumerate them off the top of my head, but I might put them in the comments or where I can put information for you. But there's tons of studies. The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton was amazing work. He has been able to prove scientifically that our minds are connected to our bodies. And we're now in an age where most people kind of accept that and realize that. But if you haven't yet, let's get on board with it, because once you realize that your brain and your mind and your body are all interconnected, then you become way more powerful. Like I was mentioning earlier, there's this trickle-down effect that energy starts at the top level. That's the spirit level, and it filters down into the mental world, into the mental level. That then filters down into the emotional level, and that then filters down into the physical level. So they're all interrelated, they're all interconnected, they're all separate, but they're all one and the same. I kind of think of it like a skewer. There's different pieces of food on the skewer, but they're all still one skewer. I don't know if that's the best analogy, but we're rolling with it. So the fourth one is responsibility for change. So you have in your power a responsibility to evolve. It's going to happen naturally, whether you like it or not. Our beingness is made such that we evolve. That's just how we're programmed. That's the type of creatures that we are. So if you want to change in a certain way, then you have to recognize that you have power over that. Otherwise, you're going to change in ways that you might not like, or that might not suit you, or that might not be in full alignment with your highest good. A responsibility that you take for your change can profoundly influence your life and your path and how you experience yourself, and whether you're happy or at peace, or whether you're miserable and you're in suffering all the time. Underneath this category of responsibility for change, there is 4 requisites for change. The appreciation that I want to make sure that we have for change is, like I just said, that change is going to happen regardless of if you want to be in control of it or not, or whether you want more authority over it or not. You will change. So the responsibility piece, I would love to invite you to really take that seriously and to really appreciate the nature of how you can own the power of the ways in which you change and how you change, when and where you change, and helping that form you into more of who you want to be, which is ultimately our goal, right? I'm speaking to all the lost souls who are finding their way back home to themselves. The best way to come back home to yourself is to become more of who you really are. So the 4 requisites for change: release work. I'll explain these in detail. The second one is setting a vision or a compelling future or a goal. The third one is taking action. And the fourth one is focusing on what you want. Okay, so release work. I mentioned that a little bit earlier with negative emotions and limiting beliefs, but there's a whole concept of how we hold on to what's called baggage. You might have heard that term referred to with people who, have a little bit more problem or struggle in their life, like, oh, they carry a lot of baggage. But everybody has baggage. It's not just a certain subset of people. Every single person, I will boldly own that claim that every person has baggage. And baggage is essentially just dwindled down to our negative emotions, our limiting beliefs, our self-deprecating identities, wounded self-esteem, like all of the things that drag us down or that block us or that hinder us. Those are what we would consider baggage. Baggage is very heavy energetically. So like when I work with a client, I can immediately feel their baggage because it's like heaviness. And a lot of people report after we release baggage that they feel lighter. That's a very common response and experience that they have, and it's an impact when they know that it's working. So releasing negative emotions and limiting beliefs, integrating parts, which we haven't even gotten into that yet, but there are sometimes parts of you that can fragment or that shatter, and release work doesn't necessarily always mean letting go of things. It can also mean bringing things together that have broken apart. Other forms of release work would be re-identifying, integrating the shadow. You might have heard that term before if you're into any psychology stuff, but that's really step number 1 is releasing baggage. Release, let go, or integrate. Step number 2, the creating a compelling future. This is very much in line with what you would hear with like The Secret or manifestation stuff. Not to be too esoteric about it. I mean, I totally will talk about it in other podcasts, but when you create a compelling future and a vision, what you're really doing is you're putting an order into reality, into present and future reality that says, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to have. And when you create that vision, like I was literally just working with a client and reminding him that it's important for him to stay connected to that vision, to think about who he wants to be, that he's a successful man, he's a strong man, he's a man with an amazing wife, that's the vision that he holds for himself. Those are like the goals that he has for his life. That is extremely important to changing and to this concept of responsibility for change, because without a roadmap or a compelling vision or where you're going, then it's like you just kind of stay put, or you don't go anywhere, you go backwards, you go sideways. If you are really wanting to accomplish something or to feel something, be something, do something, see something, you have to have a compelling vision for it. Third step is taking action. This very much includes enforcing your boundaries. You cannot get anywhere if you are not acting on anything, right? It's so funny to me because some people will come to me and they'll say like, let's just take an easy one. I don't usually work with weight loss clients, but let's just do it for giggles. I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay, great. Let's release all the baggage. You believe that you can't lose 10 pounds? Great, let's release that. Boom. You have a lot of shame about your body image. Great, boom, let's release that. You were belittled as a kid and compared to your sibling and made to feel lesser than. Boom, okay, get rid of that baggage. Okay, so we've done that. Okay, the vision that you set, you want to lose 10 pounds. Excellent. Can you feel what it feels like to be someone who's 10 pounds lighter? Can you feel and breathe that person, that version of you? Can you like taste it? Can you smell it? Can you see it? Can you hear it? Can you feel it? Like get really, really intimate and really close with that version of you. Can you do that? Good. Do that all the time. Now we got to take action. You have to actually go to the gym. You have to go on a walk. You have to eat differently. You have to eat healthier. You have to have a meal plan. Like taking action is really literally moving your physical body in the direction of your vision and your goal. Making your meat suit move in the ways that you want it to move that are in alignment with the vision and the goal that you have and where you want to go. Okay, so taking action is very self-explanatory, but it's important to enforce your boundaries when you're taking action. Okay, you might have haters. Maybe your family or some of your friends like don't believe in you and they're like, you think that you can lose these pounds? No way. That's impossible. Do you see how you eat? Do you see how blah, blah, blah? Like, heck no, that's not going to work for me. You enforce your boundaries and you say, you know what? If you want to be a part of my life, you're going to support me in this vision that I have because I'm only including people in my life right now that see me as this version of myself that I'm working really hard towards. That validation and that support is going to massively transform your experience of getting to that end goal. Taking action, enforcing your boundaries. This also means enforcing your boundaries with yourself. Like if you are lazy one day and you're like, I don't want to go to the gym, I don't want to go on a walk, I don't want to eat a salad, I don't want to eat, a paleo diet, I don't blah, blah, blah. No, that's not happening. Like we enforce the boundaries. We have a certain plan. We have a set up for you and you get to do what you've committed yourself to doing and you take action on it. You fulfill on it. You create spirals and loops of reliability and trust with yourself by saying, okay, I told myself I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to go do this thing. Lastly, number 4 is focusing on what you want. I cannot tell you how important and how overlooked this often is when we are doing change work, okay? Focusing on what you want. You are constantly telling yourself every day that you are either doing something that you are proud of or that you're not. You are building yourself up or you're tearing yourself down. Third option, you're staying the same, but I'm not going there yet. We'll have a podcast about third option stuff. You are doing one of those two things in every moment of every day. So if you want something, I would highly encourage, because we've learned that your unconscious mind doesn't process negatives, I would highly encourage you to allow your unconscious mind to see the vision of what you want and to focus on that. Do not focus on, well, I still have 5 more pounds to lose. No, you're 5 pounds lighter. Focus on what you want. You want more toneness in your body. Okay, so you're not focusing on the fact that you still got some flab. You're focusing on the tone that you just earned over the last week, in keeping with this weight loss analogy because it's a little bit easier. Okay, you are focusing on what you want. You are disregarding that which you do not want. The more you focus on something, the more that comes to fruition, the more that comes to you, into your space. If you constantly focus on, let's make another example. The weight loss one is so easy and tangible. In keeping with that one, if you are focusing on how you can't lift very strong, or you didn't get the poundage that you wanted to release that week, doesn't matter. That's not what you want. You don't want your body holding on to weight, so we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on what wins you did have, what weight you did release, or in whatever other reality that we're talking about. We're focusing on what you want. Your evaluations of yourself become the suggestions to your unconscious mind. So you're having the choice in every moment. Are you suggesting to your unconscious mind that you are great, that you're achieving your goal, that you're on your way to your vision? Or are you suggesting to your unconscious mind that you suck and you're a piece of crap and you can't do anything right and you're not releasing poundage or you're not doing what's getting you closer to your goal? Okay, so focusing on what you want is very, very important. That was great. I love talking about this stuff. Can you tell I'm like super lit up and I'm so excited? I'm like, what else is there that I can talk about? I did have a note on here that anytime that you're not getting results, figure out which area is not being addressed. Once the baggage is gone, it's gone, and you can get new baggage. But if there's not results that you're wanting to see, and whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's mental health, whether it's emotional health, spiritual health, energy, physical health, whatever, there's some area that's not being addressed. So just go address it, work through it, analyze it, get deep with it. I hope that was really fun and entertaining for you. I hope that it was filled with a lot of new information and things that can help you in your day-to-day. That's really the goal and the purpose of our chats and these podcasts. As a recap, in this podcast about neuro-linguistic programming, otherwise known as NLP, we have covered what NLP is, a brief history. It was started in about 1970s by John Grinder and Richard Bandler and has evolved over time. We reviewed the unconscious mind and the purposes of it. We talked about internal representations, negative emotions, and limiting beliefs. We talked about MER, mental emotional release, and timeline therapy. And we went into the 4 major concepts of NLP. The perception is interpretation, the cause is greater than effect, mind-body connection, and responsibility for change. And then we went over the 4 requisites for change under that last category, which, as a review, are release work, creating a compelling future or vision for the future, or setting goals, taking action, which includes enforcing your boundaries, and focusing on what you want. I hope this has been really supportive for you today. I hope it's been fun and enlivening and full of knowledge, and that you can use this to support you on your path to finding your way back home to yourself. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.